Thank you for joining us on today's Renewed Minds. This edition is brought to you by Church on Main in Blacksburg, Virginia, a welcoming and affirming church that is a safe place for you to be loved and accepted because we believe that's what Jesus wants us to do. Contact Church on Main at office@churchonmain.church for more details. In our podcast, we're always discussing challenges and opportunities that we all face, no matter what season of life we're in. Our hosts will offer some practical tips we've learned over the years and also share how love and grace can help each of us while we're trying to maintain hope. In the studio today, we have Tanya Dinkle, owner and coach of Life in Action Coaching, and me, Steve, your podcast engineer. Our pastor Tommy could not be here today, but we'll trudge on without him. But today's topic is faith and finance. You know, money and faith? These two topics shape our lives in profound ways, yet they are often seen as separate worlds. How does faith influence the way we earn, spend, and give and invest? You know, the world is driven by financial goals. How do we ensure our money choices align with our deeper values and purpose? In this episode, we want to explore what faith teaches us about wealth and stewardship, generosity, and financial wisdom. So whether you're struggling with money, striving for financial freedom, or seeking a faith-based approach to wealth, this conversation is for you. So let's talk about how to manage money with faith, purpose, and peace. Money, oh my. Conversations that
Oh my.
destroy relationships
Oh,
and
yeah.
businesses and so many things if you don't get a handle on it.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a huge component of my coaching business because here's the thing. We all have a number that we have to be able to survive. And that number is different for all of us, but we all have one. That's just the reality. It costs money for housing. It costs money for food. It's a ridiculous cost of money for eggs right now. I literally saw
Yes.
$8 in the grocery store yesterday for eggs, which is just ridiculous.
And
But yeah, I mean, it takes
dollar
money.
bird
And
flu.
yeah, right. So yeah, I mean, it costs to do anything, even the free stuff. Like we were talking about over the holidays, we put out a list of here's, 10 things that you can do that are little to no money. And they were little to no money. But at the end of the day, even if you're going to a parade, it still costs money to get there unless you walk,
Yes.
which is great. If you can do that, that's fantastic. So you're either spending money on gas to get there or you're spending money on the shoes that you're wearing to walk there, right? You
Right.
bought those at some point. So, I mean, it just takes money to exist this day and time. Now, to what level you do, then, hopefully you're allowing your finances to guide that and you're making decisions that will help you be able to do that in the way that you would like. And we'll touch on some of that today, but people do tend to think that faith and finances are two very separate things. But interestingly enough, the Bible is just sprinkled with all kinds of references to money and how God wants us to manage our money. So it's a very useful tool.
It's one of those words that show up in the Bible more often than you thought.
It does. It does. It does. So, we'll. I guess I'll just start with a story. I think most people here know that I am a financial coach, and that doesn't mean that I have always done well with money. In fact, I didn't do well with money for a long, long time, which is why I do what I do. I've walked this path for a long time, and when I learned, and it was truly a learning, it's not that I went, oh, it was just this wonderful discovery that suddenly revealed itself. No, it was a lot of hard work, and I learned some very valuable lessons. But the Bible reinforces the fact that we are here for a purpose. We've talked about that before. The financial resources that we have are a resource to live out those purposes. But it's up to us to how we do that, how we use them. And I did not do that well for a long time. And once I learned that and learned how to use those resources properly, it was literally life-changing. And I am able to do things now. My family is able to do things now that I would have never imagined that I could have or even wanted to do. I didn't even want to do them because I couldn't imagine being able to do them. So why put that on your bucket list, right? And I think, most most of us on some level have walked a version of that story, right? Some are, I just can't manage money. I've just always struggled living paycheck to paycheck. Some say I've been through bankruptcy 4 times, or, I went through a divorce that ruined me financially, or, somebody stole all my money. I mean, the stories are countless, but we have all walked a path of financial uncertainty at some point in our life. And hopefully,
Absolutely. Mm.
yeah. And hopefully we have found, or, and if you haven't found, here's, I think this is a great place to kind of start with, and you can reach out to us. We can give you some additional resources, beyond this podcast, but, there are lots of tools and references and, clarity around, finances and how faith plays into that. So they are not mutually exclusive at all. And you are well served if you let your faith guide how you use your finances.
Yeah, very true. You don't see me shaking my head since we're again recording this in a bad weather day in remote locations, but
Yeah, I'm
we've
missing
been
the
there
face to face
too.
cues too. Let me tell you.
So we've you've grown up potentially with parents who had a good handle on money, but many people have not. I
Yeah.
don't know much about what my parents' finances were like as I was growing up there. They didn't pay much attention,
Well, and
but
that
the
was
end
really common
result
too, because
was, yeah,
a lot of
they
generations
were
didn't talk
in
about
good
it.
control. Yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't, though, when we first got married. I don't say we were doing well with money. I think we didn't quite have a good grasp on what it means to have a good handle on money. So we suffered, and until we got a hold of all the basics and how to deal with the ins and outs of money and expenses and other things for day to day life. So yeah, we struggled.
Yeah. Yeah, we actually, made it part of. So, for me, I had gotten my finances squared away and was in a really good space individually as a single person. Um, and I think everybody knows at this point I got married later in life. For me, it was a screening tool for dating. So
Well, very
if
good.
someone didn't have the same beliefs that I did on finances and debt and how to manage and retirement and things like that, then that was a deal breaker for me. And, that was one of the things that Brian and I aligned on very quickly was, how we viewed money itself and how you use money to do things that you want to do and things that you are called to do. And yeah, we had that very clear and outlined up front, and then you managed everything separately until we got married and then merged it all together. But even that process, because we'd already had those really deep conversations and we knew that philosophically we were on the same page, that
Hmm.
merging was a whole lot easier than if we
Oh
had
yes.
either not talked about it or waited until we said I do to talk about it. I'm really grateful that we had those conversations well before we even got to the engagement phase of our relationship. So, it's, people say, when is it appropriate to talk about money? When it feels like it's appropriate to talk about money. When you see that things are going down a path that could lead to a forever situation, you need to be talking about it. It's just as important as where are we going to live and how are we going to raise the kids and what church are we going to go to or what type of church are we going to go to. It's right up there with all of those big conversations that you need to have.
It is just a teaser for everybody. We have on the discussion points someday to talk about planning a marriage versus
Oh
planning a
yeah.
wedding. So this
Yeah.
fits right into that conversation.
It does. It does. It does. So let's kind of get some foundational stuff. So I said early on that the Bible is sprinkled with references to money, and it is very clear in a lot of places. So I'm just going to throw out a few here. Stewardship is talked about. Psalm 24:1 says everything belongs to God, and depending on who you listen to on social media or particularly around financial topics, you've heard this before. And the idea is that what we have, the paychecks come in our name for sure, but it's not actually ours. We have used our gifts to earn money that actually belongs to God. It is in our stewardship to take care of and to do things that God wants us to do. Now, that includes putting a roof over our head. but it doesn't include putting an exorbitant roof over our head, right? We need to
Right.
be reasonable. And I'm not saying don't have nice things. I'm just, and again, you've heard this before. If you've listened to some mainstream folks, don't let your things have you. Do the things that you can afford with the cash that you have. And over time, you get to do more of those things because you have more cash.
Right. And even if
Wisdom.
you're not a believer in God,
Hmm.
although we are,
Hmm.
you've had the life experiences from the day you were born to
Hmm.
get you to the place you are to make a salary for the money. So you should be grateful for that process and all the
Hmm.
people who got you to the point you're in. And
Absolutely.
it's a responsibility.
It is. And I think we don't often think about the money that we earn as a responsibility. It's thought of more as a reward. I
Hmm.
got this for doing something good.
Right.
And that may be true, but really it comes with a huge responsibility of what you're going to do with it to make the world better, to make your community better, to make your family better, to make yourself better. How are you going to use those resources the financial resources that you've earned to do those things? And that's just flat out responsibility. That's all that is.
Hmm.
Wisdom and planning, something else that we hopefully find with our finances, and that is addressed in among other places in Proverbs 21:5, and that talks about the plans of the diligent lead to profit. So, planning what you're going to do with your money to make it go further and to do the work that you want it to do. Budgeting is really what this is tying to. Planning ahead for the money that is going to come in, um, and making sure that that's actually what it goes to, so that you don't find yourself in a situation of, where did my paycheck go? Right. I got
Right.
I worked all this overtime and I got this really nice check coming in and I have nothing to show for it, either because it's all going to pay debt or it's going to pay fun stuff because you're that's where your focus is. And again, there's a responsibility to earning money and what you need to do with it, and making sure that you can support the needs that you have, making sure those needs are reasonable. Are you living beyond your financial means? Maybe we need to dial it back. Your budget can help paint that picture for you to actually see what you've got and help you kind of dial that in, while you're managing through. I mentioned
Right.
debt.
Exactly right.
Yep.
Hmm.
Debt and contentment. And I love how these two things in our notes are pulled together because they're not often aligned in thought process. So, um, debt is generally taken on because we are not content with something. We want something that we cannot afford to pay in full for. And that can be anything from a house to a pair of tennis shoes. We buy a lot of things on credit. It's so easy to buy on credit. I mean, now you don't even have to take the card out of your wallet. It can all be on your phone and you scan your phone.
Hmm.
I mean, it's ridiculously easy. There's a couple of specific verses, Romans 13:8 and 1 Timothy 6:6-10, that talk about avoiding debt and the love of money. Now, you've probably
Hmm.
all heard the phrase, money is the root of all evil. The phrase is actually, the verse is actually, the love of money is the root of all evil, meaning loving money over other things leads us astray, is what that means. It causes us to make decisions that may not be in our best interest and are probably not in the best interest of the resources that we have to use. So how do you deal with that? Well, the whole contentment journey, right? That has nothing to do with money. That's internally. How
Hmm.
can you learn to be content with what you have? And if that is not enough to meet your physiological needs, then you got to increase the income somehow, right? But being content with what you have, that's internal work. The debt is the external side of that shows up. That's the symptom of the contentment. And then learning to control that, getting a plan to get out of debt. And then for me and for us and our family and the people that I coach, it is the commitment to not go back. and we tell people if you want to go back into debt, sure, go back into debt, and you can wander in easily enough. Most people find once they get out of debt and they get that off of their shoulders, because it's really truly a weight, that they like how that feels. And I know that was true for me. Not
Me
having
too. It was quite wonderful when all
is
of a sudden you have no credit card debt. You don't pay for we paid off our house and you don't have a car that you're paying for.
right.
It's amazing the weight that's lifted.
Yeah, yeah, and even vacations. We did a big vacation last year. We went to Europe for a Formula One race, and added a couple of other things in while we were over there. And we don't have credit cards. We don't do that. And so we paid for the trip. We paid for it as we booked going along. Now we planned the trip for about a year and a half. We were planning, and as it came time to buy things, we had saved up the money to use our debit card, because a lot of them are online purchases, but that's coming right out of our checking account, right? This is not a
Mhm.
revolving credit account. And we came home from that 10-day trip to Europe, and we're like, that was awesome. We've got all these great memories, and it's paid for. There's no bills coming
Yes.
for it, which made it even better, right? Because
Mhm.
we could then jump right back into life, and we didn't have anything negative coming back from vacation with us, which is nice. And then the other foundation of money is around generosity and tithing. And this is really about the blessings of tithing, and some of the scripture that surrounds this is in Malachi 3:10 and 2 Corinthians 9:6-7. Giving is such a blessing. I think we've all heard the expression, it is better to give than to receive. It really is. And when you are in a situation financially where you can afford to be generous with your giving and give more than you could have ever imagined that you can give, there is a satisfaction that is there that just it you mentioned peace earlier, Steve. It does give you
Mhm.
peace, but it just makes your heart happy. And it's not about the gratitude from other people. We've been fortunate to donate items and money and things to people that we never actually see. We give them to organizations, or we participate in drives or something like that. There was one really cool thing that we did on a Thanksgiving where we actually were able to see some faces of folks that we decided to be extra generous with. But you don't always get to see their faces, but there's still this internal, you've made somebody's life just a little bit different in a really good way. And that just feels so amazing. And it really is better than getting the gift itself, which is really kind of cool how that works.
Oh, absolutely. You could have changed the direction of somebody's life
Yeah.
by a simple act of giving what you have, whether
Yep.
it's money or donating something. You don't know what kind of impact that has, but however small that you're doing that, the impact could be tremendous.
Yep. And you talk about giving something that can also be your time. I mean, especially if you're on a journey to get out of debt, or where your income just isn't where you need it to be even be able to afford the essentials, housing, food, transportation, that kind of stuff. You can still, if you have time, that you donate your time. People they want human connection. They want an ear sometimes, just somebody who will listen. And what I've found is, even when I am really in a bad spot, if I can take the time to step away from me and my crazy world, and focus on someone else, even hearing their struggles, their situations, it actually helps me appreciate what I have, and it usually makes me frame it up that my situation isn't quite as bad as I thought it was. So it takes me out of my own world for a bit, and that can be very helpful in shifting perspective.
Yeah, perspective is everything
It
based on where you're looking and when you're looking. Mhm.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the practical side of financial stewardship, and making sure that we're aligning our money with the mission that we're trying to live. So I mentioned budgeting earlier. There's a thing called the 10-10-80 rule, and that is, tithe 10%, save 10%, and live on 80%. Your numbers might change a little bit. The big question that I usually get around tithing, and Steve, you've probably heard this too. I think anyone affiliated with church life has probably heard this question at some point. It's a shame Tommy's not here to share some stories on that. But, tithing, does it have to be 10%? Here's the interesting thing. The definition of the word tithe is 1/10. of your
Right.
annual produce or earnings. So a tenth of what you make annually is what you're supposed to give. Now, generally, that's in a church context. Some people choose not to give to a church; they choose to give a tenth or another percentage to charitable organizations, organizations that they are personally connected to, maybe have been impacted by, or have connections, friends, family that have been personally touched by these organizations, and they want to help them make a difference. And that's all great. That's all great stuff.
Mhm.
But it's not by coincidence that tithing is 10%. It's literally the definition. And when you're planning your budget, the best way to make sure that you are giving is to make sure that it's at the top of your list. It's kind of like
Right.
time. If when we're budgeting our time, if we talk about self-care, when we're talking about taking, making sure that we're saving time for ourselves to regenerate so that we can continue to give to other people. Don't put that at the bottom of your list, because you'll never get there. Tithing is the
Right.
same way. Giving your money is the same way. If you put it at the bottom of the list, somebody is going to come up and take it for something else, and that is may be something that you wouldn't have necessarily wanted to happen. So plan for that. Plan for it up front, and make sure
Right.
that's where it's going.
Yeah,
Um,
it's interesting looking at your 80, your 10, 10, 80 rule. As I'm reading this, I know we're getting into talking about savings, but while we're on tithing,
mhm,
there's that line that says, love your neighbor as yourself.
mhm.
Loving your neighbor is the first part of that sentence, which is equals the tithing part that you're
Yep.
giving money to charities, organizations,
Yep.
and then you pay yourself.
Yeah. Yep. And literally in a budget, that's in the budget, the templates that I work from, that's how it goes. You start with the tithing, then you go to your saving, and then you move into the living part. So even the order of how these are presented is intentional. And the living, I mean, that's your basic stuff. It's the housing, the transportation, food, utilities, Wi-Fi, which we're heavily using today. Those
Yes.
types of things, right? That are essential for the life that we have. Cell phones. I mean, most people don't have landline phones anymore, so that's not a budget line item, but your cell phone is. Um,
Mhm.
but there are other things that may not be critical. How many streaming services do you have? Do you need them all? Do you actually use them all? If you do, should you? Like, should you be up and doing other
Mhm.
things? There's a whole world out that we can go explore that
Mhm.
has amazing, amazing things to check out in all parts of the country and the world. But again, it's the 10, 10, 80. Those are rough estimates. Other than the definition of tithing being 10%, some people choose to do more, which is great. Just know that's going to impact your percentages in other places. As long as you can afford at least the core pieces for your living, then the rest of it, if you don't have any debt to clean up, then the rest of it is for either additional savings, retirement for the future. Um, if you have no debt and your house is paid for, that's fantastic. It just gives you more fun stuff. But
Mhm.
there's definitely plans that you can follow that can help you work through all of those to get to that point where there's no debt, everything's paid for, and your retirement money is working for you, and it's kind of it feels like it's on autopilot most of the time at that point in life. And then you've got these resources that you've been blessed with because of the gifts that you've been given and the money that you've earned as a result of those. What are you going to do with it? How are you going to turn it around?
Right.
Yeah. So then budgeting, that's how we plan it. But then we also, it's not just about planning it, it's about following through and making sure that you're actually doing it. It is so easy for me to every month say, I am going to spend $25 this month on clothing, which is, even for me, is a ridiculously small amount of money when I actually do buy clothes. But
Mhm.
if I say I'm going to do $25, I may not spend $25 this month on clothes. I might not do anything this month. Next month, 75. Did I have the
Mhm.
money set aside to do that? Planning ahead when I know that, if Brian's going to need new running shoes, or if I need new running shoes, like any of those types of things, planning ahead for those. And then making sure that I'm following up and going, okay, this is what I plan to spend. Is that actually what I spent? One of the things that it's kind of become a joke in our house, is our electric bill. So this is one of the core things, right? This is part of the living expenses. Our utility cost is, we get the email. We both get the email that your electric bill is ready for review. And we look at each other and go, what do you think it is this month? It's are we over or under, based on, how cold it's been or how hot it's been, and all those things. So, but then I need to go in and adjust the budget to make sure that, because that's pulling from the bigger bucket. So it's, we talk a lot on this podcast about intentionality and choices.
Right.
And
And budgets are a great tool to know what you're doing with your money and how to track it. But you and I both know that life gets in the way,
oh,
and
sure,
a budget is adaptable, and you need to be realistic about that budget,
you do.
but stay as close as you can.
Yeah, well, that's where the intentionality piece comes in, right? Is that you are intentionally going in and checking, and you are choosing to spend the time to do that, right?
Hmm.
So, you want to make sure that the mindset is not that the budget is happening to you. And I know people who are like that. Oh my gosh, it's a budget. I feel controlled. It's telling me what to do. It's actually quite the opposite. You're telling the money what to do because
Hmm.
you are managing intentionally the resources that you have so that it doesn't just disappear and you're like, wait, I'm at the end of the month and I've got nothing left and I have no idea what I did with it. Well, it's because Starbucks really enjoyed seeing your face every day, right? And
Right.
all the bucks are gone. So, like, the businesses are grateful for your business, don't get me wrong, but and treating yourself every now and then is great. But if you don't have enough income to manage the living part, like the core stuff, your housing, your transportation, your utilities, your clothing for work, then you do not need to be going to Starbucks every day. You just don't. Like there's choices that we have to make every single day that will impact your finances. And taking what I find with my coaching clients is when we flip the script a bit and we say, you know what, it's not that the money is just doing its thing. You are going to take control of your money, and you are going to decide where it goes, what happens, when, all of those things. It takes a little bit of time, but that shift in mindset is generally what helps people get over the hump of, okay, now I get it. This is not a it's being done to me type of thing. It's a I'm gonna be a grown up and I'm gonna manage what I need to manage.
Yeah, boy, you hit the nail on the head. Being a grown up, being an adult. Because as you're following this plan, there's going to be pressures on you to get out of this plan. Your friends,
Yes.
your situation, and you have to be strong enough to say, not today, because I'm working on my future here, and I just can't afford it or do it.
Yeah. Yeah, you're exactly right. And you know what I've noticed, it's really interesting to me. It used to be, 20 years ago when I started my debt journey of getting out of debt. It was kind of hush hush. You didn't talk about, hey, I just can't afford it. I'm not going to do that. Folks are very open about that now. I
Hmm.
just don't have it. I can't afford to do it. No, it's not in the budget. Those aren't bad. There's no negative connotation to any of those things, which I think is fantastic that we have
Yeah,
evolved enough as a society that we don't down people for sticking to a budget and
right.
being realistic about what they can and can't do. I think that's wonderful.
I
Um,
respect people who give me some true feedback. It says,
yeah,
"Oh, you want to go do this?" And they say, "Yeah, but maybe I can't do that today." But that gives you an opportunity do a little brainstorming, do a little DIY, to
yeah,
find how to spend time with other people who have a different budget than you have.
right, right. Because really, in those situations, it's really more about the connection anyway, right? So even if
Right.
you can, go for a walk and meet up at a local park and just have the conversation that you were wanting to have versus having it over a coffee somewhere, then why not? Because at least you're still getting the connection and the conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the Bible even has something to say about debt, and faith specifically. So Proverbs 22:7 talks about borrowing, and the verse is actually in part, the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. So I just want to be very clear. I am not making any comments or reference, and I don't think the Bible is either,
Mhm.
about rich people.
No, no, no,
There,
no, no.
there is nothing wrong with having a large resource a large financial resource. Um, the hope is that you're doing something good with that. The message here, though, is around the slave or the borrower being slave to the lender. And if you think about, regardless of what you're paying back, whether it's a car payment or we tend to be able to swallow the idea of a mortgage a little bit better because it is a house, and you're hopefully you're enjoying where you are. But when you've put a pair of blue jeans on a credit card and then you forget to pay it at the end of the month, and then suddenly the interest has accrued, and now the jeans went from $40 to $52 because of the interest and all of those things. The person that borrowed that money is a slave truly to the institution that loaned them the money to buy those things.
Mhm.
And I think when you think about it that way, that you are under someone else's thumb until you pay that back. I don't know about you guys, but I do not like feeling like I'm under somebody else's thumb. Like, I like to be able to direct where I'm going to spend the money that I'm going to spend. And that includes the jeans or the car or whatever the case may be. So it also means that in order to do that, I may be delaying some things, the purchase of things, because I'm going to save up to pay for them. But it means that when I pay for them, I'm done. I can walk away and I'm moving on to the next thing. Right.
Yep, right. The we really enjoyed, not getting the bills in the mail because you're
Oh,
right,
we do
you're a
too.
slave to the lumber because 'cause they're sending you taps on the shoulder. "Hey, you,
Yes.
don't forget me, you need to pay me." And as soon as
Yeah.
those went away, now my wife and I laugh at the mailbox and going, "Oh, they think we have lots of money because now they want us to spend it because it's all all these, flyers to say, 'Spend money.'"
Yes. Take out another credit card. Yes. And speaking of those too, Steve, there's several different strategies out there for paying off debt. Two that are more common that you hear of are the debt snowball and the debt avalanche, and they are different in that the debt snowball focuses on paying your smallest debt first and then moving forward from there. The debt avalanche focuses on paying your highest interest rate item first and then going from there. And a lot of it is personal preference, to be honest. But I will tell you, if you're looking for a strategy that will get you on track and keep you on track, my favorite is the snowball, because there's something mental when you pay off that first debt. It's the smallest, yes, but you've done it. And there is this confidence and this affirmation that you can do this that is, I have not found equaled in anything else in paying off debt. So you need that confidence. You need that affirmation when you've got, especially if you've got a long debt journey ahead, you've got thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of dollars that you're paying back. It's going to take you a little while to do that. Aside from a good plan, you need something that's going to continue to reinforce that this is working and you can do this. And I've found that the snowball method is really good for that. So just my 2 cents worth on that.
I totally agree. It's much more satisfying to get immediate results,
Yeah, it is.
because that's who we are. We want things to happen immediately, and
Yeah,
the debt
we do.
snowball is the great spot.
We do. So wealth and integrity. So building wealth is not a bad thing. Again, it's not money that is the root of all evil. It's the love of money that's the root of all evil. But using money to do things for other people is a very good thing. And using your money to make more money so that you can do more things is a very positive thing. Um, looking at how businesses practice, making sure that the organizations that you work with are using ethical practices. Do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. That type of rule is a good kind of threshold to use. And then planning for the future. Proverbs 13:22 says, "A good life gets passed on to the grandchildren. Ill-gotten wealth ends up with good people." So you're saving for the future. Now, some people feel that they shouldn't pass on anything to their children, and that is absolutely your personal right. Other
Mhm.
people want to leave them the sun, moon, and stars. That is their right as well. I think we're probably somewhere in the middle. Um,
Somewhere in the middle, yeah.
Somewhere in the middle, yeah. It's and there's a kind of a newer school of thought too of, hey, I worked really hard. I want to enjoy this while I'm here, and if there's anything left, great. If not, I'm not going to worry about it because I can't take it with
Right.
me anyway, right?
Mhm.
But again, we talked earlier about the money comes with responsibility, and it really is about the responsibility of managing it and making it continue to grow so that it can continue to be used for good. And there are ways, and estate planners can help you do this. There are ways that if you've been blessed with wealth and you are wanting to pass that on, there are even things that you can put in place that kind of put guardrails around what the beneficiaries can do, whether it's timing or where the money is spent. Or there's lots of different ways that you could customize it to make sure that your definition of good is still being carried out even after you're gone, which is really cool that ability is there.
Yeah, that's right. Very important to know you have those options.
Hmm.
In fact, the good wealth, even if you're not passing the good wealth down to your grandchildren, it's the life that you're passing down on controlling the finances is very important. You could change generations on how they deal with their money.
Oh yeah, yeah, and you can do it relatively quickly. So personal example: my husband and I both grew up in households that, at times and in very different ways, struggled financially. And I personally, I didn't learn how to create a budget or how to manage my money in a good way at all. Love my parents, but that was just not a strength for either of
Mhm.
them. But once I learned how to do it, and again, he and I aligned very early on, what we wanted to do as a couple and for our family. We taught our kids how to do the things that we believed would set them up well, and now we're watching that play out. So
Mhm.
just in one generation, we've been able to literally change our family tree financially of what our kids are going to be able to do versus what we were able to do. And it's just so fun to watch, like to know that they've been given the tools and the wisdom to know what to do and also what to avoid. Now, if they make the choice to go into those areas that we would say not a good idea, that is their choice. They're adults and they
Right.
have that right to make those choices. But we've given them the tools and the resources to understand that they don't have to do that. There are other options, and it's just fun to watch. So
It is whatever. It's. I'd rather give them tools up front and
yeah,
so they can learn how to use the tools,
yeah,
versus what having them watch you struggle with money and then realize I'm not going down that
right.
road and have to figure out all themselves.
Yeah, we actually made it a condition to get like money that we had saved set aside for college. We actually made it a condition to go through some financial literacy training outside of what the public school system gave. We required something additional that just aligned really closely with where we are and what we want. And they couldn't get the money if they didn't go through that or a resource that we approved like that,
Right.
because we wanted to make sure that what they were learning were things that we believed in. We were passing on our values when it comes to finances. And just know, as a parent, you have the right to do that. Like, you can
Yes.
say there are rules, there are things, some people would call them strings. So sure, if that's what you want to call them. But
Mhm.
it's like you said, Steve, you're trying to equip them with insight and resources and tools. And I mean, that's our responsibility as adults, as parents, as people who have influence over children, young people, whether it's nieces, nephews, what grandchildren, whatever the case may be. um, they look up to us for insight and guidance, and if we can help them avoid making the same missteps that we've taken, why wouldn't we do that? Like,
Right.
there's a part of me that feels like it's cruel if you just say, well, I had to learn the hard way, so I'm going to let you learn the hard way. Why? Like, what good does that do? Teach them what the hard way looks like, but show them how to not have to live that way, right?
Hmm.
So a lot of debate could happen there. That could be a whole episode of its own, I guess.
Yes. Like, what's that commercial? What is they're talking about insurance and they're saying, well, what is your insurance? Well, I'll go look it up on the internet.
Mhm.
I'd rather you had that personal conversation with
Yeah.
your grandchildren or children and
Yeah.
give them honest information about what finances are.
Yeah. 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 So faith and financial discussions. So how does this actually come into play? So I talk about trusting God in financially uncertain times, and that sometimes is easier said than done. It's God will provide. First of all, He always will. My dad used to say, if you tithe, you get it back. God makes sure that you get it back. And I do think, even though that seems really simplistic, I think there's truth to that. But I don't think it's because we give. I think it's, more of the mindset of, I have this is my responsibility to make sure that I'm doing something good with it. And that's what gets, like God is giving me something good in return, because I
Mhm.
have put something good out there, right? So just a little bit of a shift.
Right.
But Matthew 6:25 through 34 talks about God providing and how to handle financial stress and anxiety. And let's be real, finances can cause a ton of anxiety. You mentioned, Steve, at the beginning, that this is the root of a lot of argument within relationships. A lot of, I mean, gosh, can end marriages because people don't talk about money, aren't aligned on
Yeah.
money, have vastly different perspectives on what it means to manage money. This is a big thing. And I mean, it can come between friends, it can come between families, that outside of marriages, like this is a big thing. And people are very connected emotionally to their perspective on money.
Yeah, I won't stand on my soapbox too long here, but as you're watching business opportunities play out in the world, you're noticing some companies are struggling. And some of this is based on differences of opinion on how to handle finances. And they
Mhm.
struggle. And they're struggling now with people's lives and families. And so it goes on and on. So getting a
Yeah.
handle on money is important.
Well, and that ties to making sure that you're balancing your faith with your financial responsibility, right?
Hmm.
So I said earlier, do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Kind of a gut check, especially if I'm looking at investing in something kind of big or a little bit out of my comfort zone. Like, it's not one of my go-tos of where I'm going to normally spend my money. I do a gut check every time and say, is this right? And if there is even the least bit of hesitation for me in my mind and in my heart, I don't do it. I just don't. I take that as a God stop, that there is a pause for some reason, and I may not understand it today, and I may not ever understand it, but I'm being protected from something. And honestly,
Nodding my head there.
yep, I take that very seriously. So, giving is also an act of worship. So we talked earlier about tithing, and I think that certainly comes to mind when we say this. But there are just so many stories out there of people who are radically generous. They give millions of dollars to various organizations or causes because they are near and dear to their heart. So, you can absolutely do that, but you can worship in smaller ways too. It doesn't have to be millions of dollars. You know, 15, $20 can be the world to someone who has nothing. Or, you take 15 or $20 from everybody in a Sunday school class, or within some sort of life group, or just a community group that you're a part of, and you're collecting for a community source. That adds up. It all adds
Mhm.
up, and you're a part of that. And it's important to be a part of things. We also talked earlier about giving time, giving resources. If you've got supplies for things, maybe you can't even give your time, but man, you've got some supplies that really have just been making too comfy of a home in your basement, and you could give them to an organization that could use them and benefit. Go for it. Like,
Mhm.
there's a need across the board for everything: resources, time, money, supplies, people. Like, the list just goes on and on and on and on and on. If you've got a surplus, you can find a place to plug that in.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So, wrapping this one up, Steve, Stewardship is about trust, not just money. What do you think about that?
Boy, that is a tough one to get your head around, but it's right. You
Yeah.
have to trust that you don't own that resource. You are a steward of that resource. You're just using it, but you're using it for a better purpose, not necessarily all for you to hoard.
Right. Yeah. And think about, bigger picture, even once we're all gone, the things that we are investing in now, hopefully, are still working, right? They're still
Yeah.
providing something, something to someone. And what a great testimony to be able to provide that in a way that just keeps providing after you're gone.
Hmm.
That's really cool. That's really cool.
True, true. Because you don't know what kind of impact you're making.
Yeah.
It may be immediate impact, could be very long term,
Yeah.
generational down the line,
Yep. Or both.
or
Sometimes
both.
it's all of those things, right?
Yep.
So here's the action challenge. Create a budget. If you don't have one, create one. It can be a little scary sometimes, but there are tools and templates. But just create a plan for your money. Um, Commit to tithing something, even if it's not the 10%. Give something. Start somewhere. Give somewhere. It makes you feel good, and you're doing good for your community too, which is a good thing. And then prayer and meditation. Again, it feels like it comes up in every single episode, but wow, how
It does, doesn't
powerful.
it?
It does. Imagine that. Imagine
Uh,
that on a faith-based podcast. It comes up in every
I
episode.
mean,
Prayer and meditation can do such amazing things for our mind and our spirit, and that will drive our actions for sure. So if you're not sure, I mentioned earlier, if I feel a tug that maybe I shouldn't give, I don't. It's
mhm.
because I pray over things, and I definitely put a lot of the way that our money gets directed gets put in God's hands a lot. And I think probably everything has been put in his hands at some point. And then we become autopilots for a period of time. And then, you start looking for something new and you put it in God's hands again. So it's an
Right.
evolution. You just keep going through that. So create the budget, give something, your time, your resources, money, whatever the case may be, and pray.
Yeah, budgets don't have to be sophisticated.
Oh
They can
no.
be very simple to start out with, just so you understand what's incoming and what's outgoing. It's gonna be
Yep.
very simple.
All right. Well, another good conversation, Steve. Thanks
It
for the
was,
chat.
it's excellent.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we thank you, our listeners, for investing your time in our messages. We are so great, so very grateful for you. If you found today's episode to be helpful, please like and subscribe and share it with others who you think could benefit. If you'd like to join the conversation, or if you have specific questions about anything that we've talked about today, please reach out to us. We would love to hear from you. Just drop us an email at renewedminds@churchonmain.church. We hope you make it a great day and approach every day with a renewed mind.
Absolutely. Don't forget our Instagram at renewedmind.connect. And we will take time to respond and read and respond to everything that we get. So please don't hesitate to connect with us.
Love it. Until next time.
Hopefully, this brings a renewed perspective to the challenges and opportunities you're facing today. What steps will you be taking to show love and grace to everyone? If you have any questions or comments about our podcast, please send an email to renewedminds@churchonmain.church. You may also leave comments on Instagram at renewedminds.connect. Thanks for taking time out of your day to join us. Listen next week for the next Renewed Minds.